got the cornfield calm, Midwest tone, but he's spitting facts like a dog with a bone. Lanky frame, fire-haired eyes on the case, breaking down the game and the darkest place. Sports scores to murder boards. Who's your logic? Cuts like swords from Friday lights to chalked out lines. This redhead's brain rewrites the lines inside the Who's Your Mind, where the stories twist and stats unwind. He's a legend in flannel, mic in hand, digging deep where few can stand. From touchdowns to crime scenes raw, he's got the truth in every draw. Yeah, step in if you dare to find what's brewing inside the Who's Your Mind. He'll talk Pacers, Colts, or Colts on trial. Who's your humor with a devilish smile? He's that redhead sleuth with a box of clues. Takes your headline, breaks the news. With every stat and every scream, he's painting portraits in your stream. Don't blink, he'll tie it tight. From game night wins to murder flight. Inside the Who's Your Mind, where the facts hit hard and the lines are blind. He's a ginger ninja, smooth and slick, cracking cases play by play quick. From courtrooms to the hardwood floor, he digs for more than just the score. Tune in and don't rewind, you're deep now inside the Who's Your Mind.
All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome into Inside the Who's Your Mind, brought to you in part by Military Broadcast Radio, helping give veterans a voice. Back again for the first time in a long time, because he's off doing great and successful things. We're super happy for him here inside the Who's Your Mind. Aaman, welcome back, good sir. How are you?
I'm doing well, Tony. It's good to be back. Excited to be back on a show with you. I know it's been a minute, but I can't wait to do it.
I know we're just missing one part of the trio. We're
Where's Joe at?
We keep trying to get him. Joe's just, no, I don't want to do it. Fine. We'll get you here back one day, Joe. We will get you back one day. But Aaman is nice enough to join me because, man, we are deep into the off season, but we got less than a month and we got college football back. Technically, we have NFL football as soon as like Thursday with the Hall of Fame game. But I mean, it doesn't really count. But I mean, it is technically football. But nonetheless, though, we're deep into the off season, almost to the end. And of course, so we always have these weird rumblings that happen. We have weird rumors. We have talks about moving, talks about not moving. And I always find it's weird that it happens like towards the end. It's almost like some of these schools, some of these sports are like, we need to generate news for people to talk about us. Let's just throw something random out there and just see how people react to it. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up, because for anybody who does not know Aaman and has never met him, this man is a graduate of the University of North Carolina. He is a Tar Heel through and through, and his alma mater is flirting with the idea of moving over to the SEC. Now, for anybody who has watched the show before or anybody who doesn't know, I've talked about this a little bit for the last couple of years because the ACC is kind of the conference that's on the fringe of collapse. They're the next big one. Clemson and Florida State were the biggest two that haven't been happy with a lot of the revenue sharing and whatnot. Their media rights deal is like over 10 years long, so they're not going to get another, extension or renew done until after the Big Ten and SEC will have two done in between that as far as the length of their deals. And so those programs are obviously feeling a little bit left out, a little bit neglected, and rightfully so. Vanderbilt is making like twice as much as Clemson right now. And if I'm Clemson, I'm a little upset about that. But nonetheless, though, four of the top schools in the ACC, Clemson, Florida State, Miami, and North Carolina, have kind of all come together to say that they're not happy with the revenue distribution, that they would potentially want to search alternate avenues as far as leaving. The only thing keeping the ACC together right now, though, is their media rights deal. But that hasn't stopped teams, mainly UNC, from flirting with other conferences. Now, we know Florida State and Clemson have both flirted. They kind of both reached out to the SEC and to the Big Ten. The SEC initially said no to Clemson and Florida State just because they already have footprints in South Carolina and Florida with both of those respective teams with the Gamecocks and the Gators. But, Aaman, it'll be kind of a two-part question. So I'll ask part one. What's your thoughts on your Tar Heels wanting to move to the SEC? Because I'll be honest, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because you watched a little bit more than I have. They've had two pretty decent quarterbacks, back to back with Sam Howell, and then you had Drake May there at North Carolina. A little bit of a step back this past season. Don't really know what the future holds for North Carolina this season, but they do have Bill Belichick, who Amon's a fan of because he's a Patriots fan. So I mean that kind of works out in two ways. So do you think that if, say, everything falls through and North Carolina is able to make the move, would you want them to move to the SEC where, I mean, the ACC is kind of open for competition at the moment. Like, I feel like there's realistically a fighting chance in the ACC. The SEC, you've got like the cream of the crop as far as competition goes. But just give me your first initial thoughts, though, on them potentially wanting to move to the SEC of all conferences.
Yeah, I think the first thing you said about how it seems like teams are just wanting to make some headlines and make some news. That's what felt like UNC's entire offseason was with the Bill Belichick stuff and the Jordan Hudson stuff. I mean, we were never not in the news, which is, has its pros and its cons there. But I think for me, when I look at it, I think I look back at the two quarterbacks that we had and the fact that we didn't win a bowl game with those two guys. Drake May didn't win a bowl game. We didn't win a bowl game with Sam Howell. I didn't think Mack Brown was extraordinary as a coach. I didn't think he did a lot of things right as well. But I don't think a lot of that has changed either with Bill Belichick. And again, I could be very wrong about that fact, but it feels like it would take some monumental change for UNC to be this kind of juggernaut this season. So, I look back at even the Drake May years and we would start 5-2. And then somehow we lose against Virginia, and then we wouldn't win again. We beat Virginia for gosh sake. So I don't think jumping to the SEC makes a lot of sense for us competitively in a football capacity. I understand the money part of it would be nice. I'm also someone who doesn't want to move outside of a division, outside a conference with Duke. If Duke's moving with us, I'm happy to go somewhere, but I want to leave Duke just because I love that blue blood rivalry, and I think it is, outside of Ohio State, Michigan in terms of college athletics, probably the biggest rivalry, and you can argue might be bigger than Ohio State, Michigan. Depends on who you ask. But I don't want to go anywhere without Duke, and I don't think in the football world we're going to compete in the SEC. I think that's frank.
Yeah, and I will say, too, to the Duke and North Carolina rivalry, I think it's one of the few that the basketball rivalry transcends the football, just because historically that's what both of these programs have really been known for. And if you think about it, you look at Michigan and Ohio State, if they beat each other in basketball, nobody kind of bats an eye. It's football that takes the thing. Same with the Iron Bowl. But, you think of North Carolina and Duke, you think of basketball. And like you said, it's easily a top 5, if maybe even top 3, rivalry in all of college sports. And it is funny. One of the article that I read that kind of started this initially was supposedly the package deal would include North Carolina and Clemson. It wouldn't include Duke. Now, I would think, though, Duke would probably be in there because of, the fact that, well, they want to have that blue blood rivalry. This is actually going to be kind of a, partially because I forgot the second part of the question, so it'll give you time to remember that. Still a little bit blonde under here. This would be what I'd kind of propose to you, though. Let's say that they don't. Let's say that North Carolina and Clemson just make the move to the SEC, and Duke's just kind of sitting there on the outlier. Do you think because of where Duke stands not just athletically as far as basketball, but academically, do you think the Big Ten makes a call? And the reason why I say that is because they would kind of fit the Big Ten as far as academic standards. Duke is an extremely great law school. I mean, they're super smart down there. Football wise, kind of the same. They've had a little bit up and up. I know they had Malik Murphy, start there as a starting quarterback last season. Did pretty well for the most part. I mean, they beat the brakes off of Clemson at one point, which everybody's like, "Whoa, what are you doing, Duke?" Nobody expects that. But that was with Riley Leonard. That wasn't with Malik Murphy. Do you think the Big Ten then would almost try to poach Duke as quickly as they could, just so that way you could kind of keep the rivalry, but then you could also really plant the seeds for, we need to have the SEC face the Big Ten more frequently to try to prove who the better conference and better dominating conference is in, and what better, and again, to at least do it on the basketball side, then what, Big Ten's going to take Duke, SEC is going to take North Carolina. Let's see who can win as far as the matchup goes.
Yeah, I think it would be almost dumb not to, right? I think these two conferences in the Big Ten and the SEC are just going to go back and forth and should really be just looking to kind of split markets if they can.
Yeah.
The SEC should go after both UNC and Duke, but if they don't go after Duke, the Big Ten shouldn't let them go there at a discounted rate and should easily take that program up because Duke and Carolina are going to have to play. That's the like I can't imagine a world as a Carolina student and you're not thinking about the UNC Duke game in any sport of it. Even the football game is electric. It's the victory bell that we take around everywhere. So I think that if you're the Big Ten, it makes the most sense to do it. I think they also do fit the bill. They feel like Notre Dame-ish. I know they're independent, but they kind of have that same feel. And again, if you're the Big Ten, you've already said, look, we'll go out on the West Coast and go get Oregon. Okay, yeah, we can go out on the East Coast and go get Duke. I don't think it makes too big a difference there.
Yeah, no, I mean they already poached Maryland and Rutgers, back in 2014 as far as, hitting the East Coast goes. So again, why not kind of try to continue to spread your feet into the South, which is where the Big Ten wants to go anyway. I did remember the second part of my question. So see, I told you it was going to happen. It was just going to take me a minute. So you had talked about the Bill Belichick being probably one of the biggest news and biggest factors. What are you expecting from Bill this season? Because one of the biggest questions that a lot of us had in the NFL, especially post Tom Brady, is what does Bill Belichick look like as a head coach? And I know as a Patriots fan, I know you had to be flustered because, I mean, as somebody who is kind of, I'm going to be honest, I was really rooting for the Patriots downfall, and it couldn't have happened any sweeter than what it did after, just 20 years of destroying everybody. It's kind of nice to see, Bill has not looked good when he doesn't have a good quarterback. And much to your point, you had a Sam Howell, you had a Drake May. I don't know who they have at quarterback right now. I know the young man that they had starting for him last year, he kind of had an up and down season, and North Carolina was just kind of there. And I know he's brought in a lot of his own staff. He's brought in a lot of former players. So again, the expectations are there. But do you foresee North Carolina having a fairly good season so far? And while you give your response, I'm actually going to look up North Carolina's schedule because I haven't heard anything bad about their schedule. Because I mean, they do play in the ACC. It's pretty open. But just your thoughts on the whole Belichick thing coming in anyway.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, right? Like you move off of Mack Brown, and you thought, oh, you're going to go younger, you're going to go someone who kind of fits the new generation, and then you kind of just turned in the opposite direction. And I think there's plenty of hype and buzz, but a lot of it is unknown. And genuinely, I don't have any idea of what this team is going to look like because it's very new. You still have Max Johnson in house, but I don't reckon he's going to start. I think it's going to be more likely than not Gio Lopez, the transfer that came in, the lefty. I think he's probably going to be the day one starter. They do have Bryce Baker sitting back there, but his early spring day hasn't looked great. He's very raw, and I just don't think he's going to play right away. And you lose Amarion Hampton, you lose some members of that defense, and I think that the problem with this team a lot has been our secondary hasn't been able to hold up. And so you've seen in practice videos, Bill's trying to work in new philosophies and is trying to get holdings out of the way. But those initial practices have looked rough, according to people that I've talked to that work at Inside Carolina and whatnot. It hasn't been the smoothest of sailing so far. So I genuinely have no idea what to expect, but I don't expect us to be competing for, a top 15 team in the country. I don't really expect us being competing for a top tier bowl game. I don't know if we're really competing in the ACC. I think there's a lot to be left up into the air because again, the one thing that we've had for a long time is Amarion Hampton to carry the rock. And even if, we can't block and even, we can't pass block, we can't get down the field, we can just run the ball. And that's something that we've lost. So that'll be really curious to see what the identity is without our big back.
Yeah. And I will say too, though, and I'll bring it up here so you can kind of give me your thoughts and people who are watching anyway can at least see the schedule honestly is pretty favorable for them. I mean, it's not a bad schedule. So they start out week 1, they host TCU, which is winnable. I feel like TCU is kind of in that same boat of, what do we kind of expect from him? Obviously they were only a couple of years removed from a national title game where again, they got destroyed, but they lost a lot of that talent, to the draft, to the transfer portal. And then we kind of saw them take a step back last year, probably more of the same. So I feel like TCU is kind of up in the air. They go to Charlotte that's winnable. They host Richmond. That's very winnable. UCF is another one that's kind of interesting because you have Scott Frost coming back to UCF. I know they kind of had the experiment with KJ Jefferson. I don't think he's there anymore, but I'm not sure, to be 100% honest with you. So again, that one I feel like is kind of a toss up. Really, the only for sure I would say loss is Clemson, just because Clemson is pretty restat. Cade Klubnik is considered probably the best, if not one of the three best quarterbacks coming back into college football this coming season. Then you go to Cal. Cal lost their starting quarterback. What do they kind of look? What do they look like? They host Virginia. They go to Syracuse. They host Stanford, Wake Forest, Duke, and NC State. So realistically, I mean, let's say everything goes the way that it could potentially go. 9-3, I would think. I mean, maybe a loss to Clemson. We'll say maybe a loss to UCF and maybe to NC State, just because I feel like NC State's kind of scrappy and kind of there. They're not going to say they're going to dog walk anybody, but they're scrappy. They've been better than I think what a lot of people have expected. They just haven't made that transition either. So I mean, I feel like 9-3, maybe 8-4 isn't completely out of the question.
No, it's not out of the question, but this is how we've looked at the schedule the last 3 years and how it's always gone. And it's that Virginia game on the 25th, where it's like that part of the season, you get through Clemson and you're like, okay, really at this point, it should be maybe 2 losses at the most, right? You're looking at maybe TCU, Clemson for sure, and then maybe UCF would be the other name that kind of gets thrown out there. Okay, these are losses. But for whatever reason, that Virginia game seems to be a loss wherever we play. And then from there, we'll lose to Duke and we'll lose to State. And it's been tough. And I think that's where you get really hesitant. And it's because you just don't know what this team looks like. There's a lot of turnover. And again, it's not just at the Bill Belichick spot. It's at the Omarion Hampton position. It's at the quarterback position is going to be different. You're going to have a different wide receiver group. You're going to have a different linebacking core. Is the secondary going to be better? You don't really know. The defensive line looked great last year, and they've looked great early on in camp. But is that more of a testament to the losses in the offensive line? Or is that just the continued greatness of what we saw last year? Those are all real questions. And I think you're right. Like 9-3, 8-4 isn't out of the question. But that Virginia game, I've seen horror stories where you're 9-1, or you're 5-1 headed to Virginia, and they're 3-2, and you're saying there's no way we're gonna find a way to lose this game, and somehow we won't just lose it, we'll lose by 15. And that's where I think things will get really interesting for us. Can we get past Virginia, and can we show a consistency? Because we've started every year out great for the past 4 or 5 years with Howell and Drake May, and then it's been the tail end that's really kicked our butt.
Yeah, and it is interesting too, because it's like there's always that one trap game that you're like, man, is this the game that's going to potentially trip us up and whatnot? And yeah, maybe it's Virginia for you guys for whatever reason. But real quick though, we'll move into the second half of the show and kind of our last big topic that has a lot to it as far as its depth and whatnot. So obviously, former Tar Heels head coach Mack Brown came out and said that he thinks there should be a split in college football. And believe it or not, national champion coach Urban Meyer backed him on that and said that he and Mack Brown used to talk about this a lot of conventions and a lot of sit down meetings together and whatnot. And Mack Brown essentially thinks that college football right now, and a lot of college football fans think this, that the system itself is broken. There's the NIL deal. There's, a lot of these more, bigger funding schools and whatnot. Texas can spend, $40 million on their roster. Ohio State can do about the same. Oregon supposedly has unlimited money because of the president of Nike and whatnot. So, all of these massive schools that are able to essentially, buy their rosters, that leaves the door closed for a lot of smaller schools. And I'm not even talking about smaller schools. No offense, North Carolina, not saying they're a smaller school, but smaller than Ohio State, smaller than a Texas. I'm talking about, the group of 5 schools like the East Carolinas, the Charlottes, now, Delaware has finally moved up to being a group of 5 school. Missouri State has moved up to a group of 5 school. These schools that don't have that type of money, they don't have that type of boosters and those type of fundings and whatnot. And they're considered FBS, they're considered Group 1, so they compete against all of these power schools. They get their teeth kicked in, usually because they get paid $1 million+ to do so. Now, unless you're like Marshall and you can get a win against Notre Dame and they pay you $1 million to beat them, then I mean it's a win. But how often is that going to happen?
Right.
And Mack Brown brought up a good point. You know, why don't you split it like you have the FCS, who's also Division 1, but they're just in a different system. They only play FCS schools. They sometimes play FBS schools and whatnot. And honestly, last time I saw South Dakota State face Iowa, it was like 9-6, and Iowa only won because their defense, because that offense was atrocious. But you know, he brought up that the Group of 5 should have their own national title. They should have their own playoff system. They should have their own Heisman winner. They should have their own award system, you know, like the Blitnikoff, the Dave Ramsey, or not Dave Ramsey. I don't know why I said that. Yeah, the Dave Ramsey Award. You know, the all the different college awards that are out there as far as, you know, your positions, where you play at in college football and whatnot. Do you necessarily disagree? Because, I mean, we look at, let's take Cincinnati, for example, because, you know, they were a Group of 5 school that, you know, made the 4-team college football playoffs. You know, they had a wonderful record. They beat Notre Dame. Like they were established, and there was a lot of like, we don't really want to do that. Now, obviously they got destroyed by Alabama. They were able to hang up 21 points. So, I mean, they kept in there. They still lost, I think, like 42-21, but I mean, they still at least put up a fight. But then, of course, we can look at last year with Boise State and against Penn State. They shut down Ashton Genty. Boise State got crushed like a Group of 5 school was intended to get crushed by a Power 5 school like Penn State. Just be more beneficial and more entertaining for some of these Group of 5 schools, because then let's say you do have a dominance, you know, just the same as they do with FCS. Like, hey, you know, look at, you know, North Dakota State. Like, I feel like they could very easily get an invitation up to the FBS level with no problem. Now, how well they do, that's another question. But, you know, I could very easily see them getting maybe a potential invite to the Mountain West, to maybe the Pac-12, if they're trying to, you know, extend and, you know, reestablish themselves. Same with Montana and Montana State and whatnot. For me, the Group of 5, I mean, if you could do that, you face primarily other Group of 5 schools, you get more football, you get kind of better quality football. These guys have a better chance of maybe making more money. And again, you have a better chance of highlighting and showing what you can do. And it's like, hey, you know, this guy was one of the best players in the Group of 5. Now, compared to nationally, when you compare, you know, maybe a quarterback in the Group of 5 as compared to, you know, say like a Garrett Nussmeier, a Cade Klubnik, a Drake May, like, yeah, you look good, but you didn't play exactly against the best competition. It's like, no. Out of this group, he's the best one. Like, do you think that would be something that would be completely out of the realm, or shouldn't be out of the realm of possibility?
I think it's not a bad idea, to be honest with you. And I think it really comes down to how much does the whole $20 million scenario kick in for these NCAA teams? Is this really a hard cap at 20 million, or is this, hey, this is 20 million officially from the NCAA, and
Yes.
can these college programs still say, okay, but we have NIL money from a different donor that's kicking in another 20 million, right? How much does that ruling really affect what's happening? Because if it's a hard cap, then now it's a even playing field. Everyone's got $20.6 million to work with, and figure out how your roster is going to work. And now everyone can compete with everybody. I think that's the most ideal scenario. But this whole NIL thing has probably showed us that we're not going to get the most ideal scenario most consistently. So if you're not going to be able to hard cap it, I think the Group of 5, second division, if you will, makes a lot of sense. But you can add another layer of, let's have promotion and relegation, kind of like European soccer, where if you finish towards the bottom, you're going to be bounced down, and the other, you know, the top 1, 2 are going to get bounced into the Power 5 and whatnot. And so that gives you just that little bit more. There's a lot more on the line. There's more stakes in every scenario. And if you show that, hey, we're a good program, we can beat everyone in our conference. All right, in our group. All right, you're going to move up and see what you can do against the big dogs, and have to work your way back up to play the big dog. I think there's a lot of room for that to be a cool aspect. But I do think ideally you have the hard cap, and now everyone's got $20 million to work with, without any extra donor NIL coming in.
Yeah. If I understood it correctly, according to Brady Quinn, who I don't know if you've ever heard him break it down. Brady Quinn does a really good job of it. From my understanding, is so the schools have a hard cap of what they're able to directly pay, but through NILs, through boosters, everything like that, that's a separate fund.
Yeah.
So realistically, yes, everybody has a hard cap of like 20.6 million. But if you're in Oregon, if you're in Texas, and you have, another 40 million in assets, then you realistically have a $60 million roster, not, just a $20 million roster. So I do agree. I think if there was a hard cap, just like the NFL, and realistically, I feel like I'm kind of surprised they haven't, or they maybe aren't toying around with copying that as far as trying to make it even. Because again, yeah, if you're looking at some of these schools, let's take someone like Kansas State. Kansas State pretty consistently good, usually 9-3, 10-2. They have a couple kind of bad losses here and there, but never excruciatingly bad. But they don't have the boosters that a Texas does, that an Ohio State does, that a Miami does. So they're not going to be able to compete with that. But if you put a cap, okay, this makes it a little bit more interesting. And I think then you'd kind of have to have the flexibility, and maybe you start to see talent spread around a lot more, because, okay, yes, if Miami could, they'd be paying this kid, $15 million, but they can't. So he's going to go to TCU, who is going to pay him $15 million, and he's going to be the starting position wherever he's at TCU and whatnot. So I do think that's possible. But we'll have to see. The other thing though that you mentioned, because I've heard a lot of people talk about the European soccer as far as the relegation and de-escalation and whatnot. Here's the only thing I think would be an issue with it is, so I know a lot of people are afraid of schools. So say somebody like Vanderbilt, or say somebody like IU or Purdue, because they've talked about, it's crazy that, bottom feeder teams in conferences are getting, $80 million. And it's like, wait a minute. Again, Vandy's getting paid $80 million. Florida State's getting paid like 40. It's like, wait a minute. Why are we making half of what Vandy's getting? And they're just getting their teeth kicked in by, basically everybody. And we're over here, actually competing for a title. Not last year, but, year before. So I think for me, the contract and the money status, because then how do you look at a program and say, okay, hey, you really sucked this year, and maybe it's a matter of fact of injuries. Maybe it's a matter of fact, it's one of those, you look at the Big Ten this year, and the Big Ten was absolutely stacked, or the SEC is absolutely stacked. You've got Florida, South Carolina are kind of, dark horses this year. Georgia is still Georgia, Bama is still Bama. LSU spent a ton of money in the transfer portal and whatnot. Texas is obviously still there. So it's like, okay, some team could very well end up at the bottom at like 4-8. It's just because they had to run through the gauntlet, and they literally got their teeth kicked in. I don't think it's necessarily bad enough for them to get, deregulated back down, because there's always so much you can do about that.
Right.
But again, that money thing of like, hey, you lost, so you're going to go from like 80 million to like 5. Have fun. So, but no, I do agree. I think it'd be interesting if you did have something like that. And I think that's also where I'm kind of surprised that we don't see more kind of call ups from like somewhere like the FCS up to FBS. Because when they said that they were going to bring in Missouri State and Delaware, I'm like, hasn't North Dakota State won like the last 10 of 11 FCS championships? And I'm like, they're just getting no invite, or maybe they're just like, nah, we'll stay where we're at. Don't worry about us. Don't worry about us. But
And it feels like a good opportunity for, maybe a Big Ten to say, hey, North Dakota State, come join us, and at least bring that, that really rich fan base and market into your conference, right? If maybe you can't poach some of these bigger names, to get these names that are ready and hungry. And again, maybe it could very well be North Dakota State's like, no, we're pretty comfortable winning 10 from 11 national championships. And if that's the prerogative, that's the prerogative. But I can't imagine that if you're offering them, a $20 million bonus or incentive or whatever the case is, and revenue share, that they would turn that down.
Yeah. Here's something I'm going to pitch out there, and I might get a little bit of hate. I don't know what your thoughts will be, but for Mike, whenever he's nice enough to make clips for me for TikTok and YouTube and whatnot, this might get me a little bit of hate, but I still have to ask, what if you kind of treated, and you could do it with a group of 5, or you could do it with the FCS, either one. What if you almost made like your own version of the G League? like, the Big Ten kind of split off like their territory. Like, this is the schools we want in our little G League. The SEC can do theirs. The Big 12 can do theirs. The ACC, if they still consider the Pac-12 one, go for it. I mean, I feel like honestly that might be the only way to save the Pac-12 is to do that. But make them like a G League, and like you said, make the monetary offer of like, hey, we're gonna make you a G League school, and let's say they do something like, if you win the national title, we'll subsidize you like $25 million to your program or something like that, just out of the Big Ten's budget. So that way, is it a matter of, do they recruit better players? Do they just develop players overall? Is it one of those, maybe like you said, maybe it's a relegation derelegation thing of like, well, you're still a part of the Big Ten, you won't get as much money, but we're going to bring this program up because they're competing better type of thing. So I mean, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because while I'm not going to say it's necessarily going to devalue the other programs, like let's be realistic. Unless North Dakota State just gets like $1 billion every year, like consistently, because everybody decides that they love the Bison, I don't think they're ever going to get to that level where they're going to be able to compete with an Ohio State type of thing. So it's like, okay, well, if they can get money for this, so let's say the 25 million, that can go to their stadiums, that can go to their athletic facilities, that can go to their student body. Like, they can use that money, and it continues to build college football and college sports as a whole up, instead of just really hogging it for just one conference as a whole. But that's just my thought on it.
No, I don't mind it, especially if you are going to say, hey, we're going to kind of tier off college football. There's no reason why you can't have a Big Ten tier 2, if you will, and they still have competing for their own national championship amongst the other tier 2. It does, right? In the SEC tier 2, in the Pac-12 tier 2, whatever the case is, they're all still competing for the same award, their awards in the tier 2 division. And then it makes a promotion and relegation easier as well, if you want to do that, because now you're not worried about, oh, who's going to be taken out of a conference, who's going to get pushed into a conference. You're still in the same conference, you're just in the different tier. So I don't think that's a bad option at all. Again, I think all of us would rather see just a hard cap set in there, and then boom, everyone is in a level playing field, and you've got talent everywhere, right? You don't have just 22 NFL guys on one roster, but you got 22 guys at 22 different schools that can all be a first round pick. That's where you want to be. But I think if this is the way things are moving, that's a great way to make sure that, okay, we can still keep it where money's getting distributed very well between all these schools. And then if there is a program that is making a jump up, hey, you're going to make that jump up, and you'll get the money boost, and you'll still be part of the conference, and you'll still be competing under that name. So I think there's creative ways to do it, and I think that's a really, really creative way to go about it.
Yeah, and like I said, and my big thing is it keeps the money. It gives these schools an opportunity to really make a lot of money, because I mean, for some of these, they may not ever get that NIL chance, they may not ever get the national media attention and whatnot, because obviously the FCS has their own coverage, but I mean, it's not displayed, it's not advertised like everything else. But like you said, in all honesty, I kind of like that, even if they did it maybe in like 3 tiers. So say you have like the regular Big Ten is like tier 1. Let's say the group of 5 is like tier 2, and then FCS is like, tier 3 or whatever. And then kind of maybe make it a little bit more fluid between 2 and 3. Cause obviously I think the growth and the progression would be a little bit more similar there. And then again, like you said, if you're consistently showing like, hey, you're competing, you're making an effort, you're recruiting solid guys, or you're at least developing solid guys, we're going to bring you up. And then, again, maybe somebody's like, take a year to kind of go back down, and then, prove that you deserve it. Then you can come back up, type of thing. So I don't disagree. And my big thing is keeping it in college football. It gives these smaller universities an opportunity to really succeed. And again, it gives them financial revenue that they're probably not going to get otherwise.
And those are the stories we all love to see. Like how, obviously when Texas, but TCU was in the national championship game, we all knew Georgia was going to win that national championship game, but it was so cool to root for TCU there. When Boise State was making all these runs and making some noise back in the day, we loved rooting for Boise State. We love rooting for these teams that probably aren't going to win, have an opportunity. And the moment you say, okay, we're just going to, bring everything together, and money's going to go to the top place when they need to get there, you take away this opportunity for these smaller programs to really have any success. And that's not what you want. You want Cinderellas, you want stories, and you want different names competing, right? It obviously probably going to see Ohio State, Alabama close to the top 4 every year. Yeah, that's a given. But you'd love to see a TCU, a Kansas State, somewhere just around the mix and throwing their hat in the ring every year.
Yeah. And I'm going to throw a little bit of a surprise topic on you, but believe it or not, it does actually tie in with this pretty well. Mike and I talked about this a couple weeks ago because I heard it was in the rumblings of happening. The NCAA is talking about expanding March Madness from, 64 teams right now, if I remember right, to potentially 68 or even 72. For kind of that same reason, they want to potentially extend the offer of a potential Cinderella story to be able to come in there, maybe get a couple upsets and whatnot, and maybe they make a March Madness tourney run. Here's the couple things I heard about it. One, wasn't a fan because if you think about the play-in games they already have to decide the last 4 spots anyway, nobody really watches those. And I don't know if you noticed if you made a bracket last year or not, like they're like, oh no, you got till Thursday when the actual tournament starts.
Exactly.
So it's like whoever you pick doesn't really matter as far as the play-in. Like your bracket and everything like that starts on Thursday. It's like, well, that's kind of messed up. Like, wait a minute, like at least give them a little bit of a chance. So I think that's one thing that might diminish it is, yes, there's more games, but what is the quality of those type of games thing? But I will say one of the things that I do like about it, and I mean, I already like it to start with college basketball anyway, is I feel like with basketball, while you can have a ton of talented players, like, how often did we see get Purdue upset by like a 15 seed? It's like, wait a minute, Purdue is supposed to have like the best players and they just lose on like a last second shot type of thing. Like, I feel like with basketball, it wouldn't be as bad because, hey, you can be a Cinderella story and make this happen. Now, football, I don't know if it's going to happen as much because of NIL and whatnot. I know for the person who disagreed with expanding the tournament was like, well, you're probably not going to have those in basketball as much. I'm like, yeah, to me, basketball, well, I'm not going to say you can't always tell that there's a difference in talent and whatnot. Basketball, you have a chance to be even on the court. Like anything is possible and anybody can get hot at the right time. Now, football is definitely, you can tell. You can tell a massive difference. It's like, here's Justin Jefferson versus, the primary defensive back for like South Alabama. Like, you're gonna get cooked, man.
Yeah, with basketball, we've seen one player be able to take over a game. That just can't happen in football. It's 11v11, and you need all 11 guys on each side of the ball to be able to contribute. With basketball, you can have a Gordon Hayward just go ballistic for 4 games and nearly beat Duke in a national championship, right? Like that's very plausible of a story to happen. The thing I'd be careful of with the expansion of the NCAA tournament is, what's the reason behind it? Do we really feel going from 64 to 68 invites more Cinderellas, or is it really just, hey, we can milk a little bit more coin out of this tournament here? What is the true reason behind it? Because I don't mind going to 68, but I think the part of, hey, if I fill out a bracket, they're not going to make me finalize until after these 2 rounds of play-in games. So that feels like they're not really ever in it anyway. And then why are we doing this? Are we really promoting these Cinderella teams, or are we saying, hey, we can play 4 extra games and just continue to squeeze these things out? I think doing something good for the wrong reasons could almost be just as hurtful as doing something bad for the right reasons. And I just would be careful with that, because at the end of the day, honestly, as far as college tournaments go, March Madness might have it perfectly done to where it captures our imagination pretty perfectly. We're all invested through every round because we're sat there, okay, did my pick win here? Did my pick win there? There really isn't anything that needs to be added to it. I haven't seen anyone who's missed a tournament where I'm like, yeah, that team would have won the national championship if they made it. You can always speculate, yes. But I think they have a good system. You win your conference as a Power 5, you're going to be in. And then, the committee doesn't have a lot of room for error in basketball versus in football. When you expand from 4 to 12, it made a lot of sense because 4, you're missing a lot of really good programs. With 12, okay, you can see there's more and more teams getting added. Yes, you probably know the 4 to 6 that have a chance to win the whole thing, but you have to give everyone a shot there. With basketball, I feel like they do a good enough job as it is.
Yeah. And I was going to say too that that's one of those, like you said, when you look at, okay, we're going to play 2 rounds of playing games. It's like, yeah, again, you're not really getting the good quality. Like you said, if you can win your conference, and to me, the conference is almost kind of the start of your playing games.
Mhm.
And I say that because those are the games that kind of matter the most. Because you think about it, let's take the Big Ten, for example. You knew Purdue was going to be in there, you knew Michigan State, you knew Michigan, you knew Oregon was going to be in there. So it's like, okay, I don't have to worry about those 4 teams. Those 4 teams don't have to win the Big Ten for them to be in. They were going to be in regardless. Be it,
Yeah.
let's say you take somebody, if I remember right, it was Iowa. Iowa, I think, was like 19-13. It's like, okay, they got to make a deep run in the Big Ten if they even want to be remotely considered to be invited into March Madness and whatnot, and they didn't. But I mean, that's really your chance, because some of these teams, it's like, yeah, we're not really worried if we don't win the Big Ten or not. Like, that's really not our thing. So that, to me, if you can win your conference, that's your playing games that matter. And like you said, if you can't win your conference, there's never going to be a time where I'm like, man, that team was just on the
Yeah.
fringe and they just didn't get it. Now, if you can make a deep run, you may or may not be able to get in as far as being like one of the last 4 teams in and whatnot. It's, again, depending on the quality of your wins and who you beat and whatnot. Yeah, with football, I always feel like it's interesting. And it's funny when you said that they expanded to 12, because I thought the same thing. I'm like, okay, got a little bit more wriggle room, like the 4 to 5 that we're going to pick. But then after that, it's like, okay, there's some flexibility. And then sure enough, like the very first year, we have controversy because everybody's
Yeah.
like, get rid of IU. IU doesn't count. Yeah, they beat everybody they're supposed to. They lost to Ohio State and Notre Dame. And everybody's like, quality losses. I'm like, I don't know what in the world a quality loss is. Like, L is in hell. Like, you lost to a better team. Like, okay, I don't know if that necessarily says that I'm a good team because I lost to a good
Right.
team.
I
But
scheduled Alabama, Ohio State, and LSU on my schedule and lost those 3. Okay, good for
right,
me.
this is going to be kind of off topic and a little bit of a tangent. I actually had an argument with a guy about that because he tried to argue that if you put Vanderbilt in any other conference other than the SEC, if you put them in the ACC, they're a top 3 program. If you put them in the Big Ten, they're a top 5. And I'm like, wait a minute. So because Vanderbilt gets the crap kicked out of them by Georgia, Alabama, LSU, and Texas, they're going to be a top 5 program in the Big Ten or the ACC. And I was looking, I'm like, well, they're not beating Ohio State, they're not beating Penn State, they're not beating Oregon. I was like, maybe they beat IU, because I was just going through the standings. I was like,
Right.
maybe they beat
Michigan, like,
IU.
are they going to beat Michigan
Maybe they
consistently?
beat Michigan. Maybe they beat Illinois, because I think Illinois was like
Right.
5th. I was like, no, I don't think so. Then I'm looking at the ACC. I'm like, are they beating a Cam Ward led Miami? No. Are they going to beat a Cade Klubnik led Clemson? No. After that, I'm like, okay, maybe, but are you going to
Yeah.
be able to do that consistently? Probably not.
Right.
But no, I do always laugh at that. It's like, yeah, I lost to like the best teams. Okay, so does that mean Mississippi State is just like a sleeping
Right.
powerhouse because they got destroyed by everybody last year, or like what are we talking about
Like,
here?
there are losses that you feel good about, right? If you're competing
Yeah,
until the end and then you lose, that's one thing. But like, just
right,
because you lost to Alabama 50-3
right.
doesn't
Like,
really inspire me to believe that if you were to play UNC, that you
mm,
would have won the game. I'm not saying that you can't, but
right,
nothing about that scoreboard reads that, yeah, you would have beat UNC. Now, if you lose to Bama 50-45, however you
right.
got there,
It's like,
okay,
okay,
I can
you
give
put
you a
in
little
the
bit of
effort.
credit, right?
Yeah,
That's a little different.
you kept it close. Like, the effort was at least made. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, back before I get off my tangent again. Uh when they expanded to 12, they're looking at it, and obviously there's issues with Indiana, there's issues with SMU, there's issues with Boise State.
Right.
And then obviously there's issues with Clemson because Clemson won the division. They got in with 3 losses, and everybody's sitting here, well, what about Alabama? What about Ole Miss? What about South Carolina? And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, you can make an argument for South Carolina because, again, South Carolina had the quote quality losses that were better. They lost to Alabama, they lost to LSU. Obviously, Ole Miss got upset by Kentucky, which is like, yeah, that's pretty bad. But the one that made me laugh the most, and at least initially with ESPN, and I think it's one of the few times that we saw the public outlash kind of overtake their opinion, because I think ESPN really wanted to put Alabama in the playoffs. But it was like you said, you got destroyed by Vandy.
Yep.
It hadn't happened since 1984. Congratulations. You lost after almost 40 years. Suck. And then you got destroyed by an injury riddled Oklahoma team, like 24-3. And it's like, wait a minute. And you're going to sit here and tell me that you deserve to be in the playoffs? Absolutely flipping not. But no, I mean, I do agree. I think with basketball, they have the flexibility a little bit more. It's better tailored. I think the tournament system as a whole is better. But I did hear something interesting again from Brady Quinn when he broke it down with football, because obviously they're talking about expanding to 16 teams potentially. There's talks about 14, there's talks about 16. I think they have until December of this year to get figured out if they want to do 14 or 16 for the 26 season. Yep. And obviously the two biggest models that have been pitched out there, the Big Ten is primarily pitching, 4, 4, 2, 2, and 3. So 4 spots for the Big Ten, 4 for the SEC, 2 for the Big 12, 2 for the ACC, and then 3 up at large, 1 being Notre Dame, and then you basically have 2 others. And then I think the group of whoever the group of 5 champions are as well. If my math is right, that all adds up, I think.
Yeah, I think that tracked. I was there with you.
Okay, I'm hoping so. If not, everybody can roast me, but I'm pretty sure that math all maths up. Now the SEC is pitching 5 and 11. So basically, I think the top 5 teams, as far as whoever wins the Big Ten, whoever wins the SEC, ACC, the group of 5 and whatever, and then you have 11 at-large spots. Supposedly, the SEC is not going to get behind the Big Ten's pitch of the 4-4 model, because the Big Ten wants the SEC to then play 9 conference games and not have as many out-of-conference games scheduled. The SEC pushes back and says, but we beat the crap out of each other a little bit more. We have, let's say, deeper talent almost, to an extent. So the SEC isn't as big a fan of that. And obviously, I don't think the Big Ten is as big a fan of 5 and 11, because they want to have the opportunity for more Big Ten teams to get in. Yeah. Obviously, Ohio State would maybe not get in if that was the case this last year, because they lost to Oregon, and then they lost to Michigan and whatnot. So, I mean, I think with football, there's a lot more that can be done with some of the flexibility. But you are right. I do think it's interesting that I feel like football is just so weird how they do their evaluations of like, but they lost to this team, but they beat this team, and I'm like, yeah, but again, it's hard to argue when you lose to. Like they always talk about historical context, like, if you put Alabama in, Alabama's going to make a run. Okay, you lost to a team they hadn't lost to in like 40 years, and you're still trying to sit here like, yeah, but that doesn't matter.
Right.
Brother,
yeah, exactly.
Brother.
It's so weird. And that's why, like, the plan from Alabama, like, in a vacuum, I actually don't mind your top 5, your conference winners, and then 11 at large, your next 11 best teams. The problem is, how are you deciding 11 best teams? That's been where things get really tricky. The committee has clearly shown sometimes really great stuff, and then other times you're like, really, is that what we're going with? You never really know what you're getting. Versus with the Big Ten model, while I feel like there's probably more room for teams outside of the Big Ten and the SEC to be a part of it, at least there's a formula in how you're going to get to the 16 that you're after. So, and it takes a little bit out of the committee's hands. So I think those are a couple of things that become really difficult, because the committee's been so erratic with the way they've made decisions, and it's been highly controversial for a long time.
Yeah. Well, and that was Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti's argument, is taking that out of the committee's hands. Like, look, you just take the 4 best teams out of the Big Ten, they're in, take the 4 best out of the SEC, 2 best out of the Big 12 and the ACC, and then you figure out the last 3 spots. That's all you got to do, is figure out the last 3. And one of the pushbacks that I think does make sense, let's say they do go to that model and they do have 4, like, let's say it's Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, and Indiana again. And let's say Indiana is the 4th best team, but they're sitting there at like 7-5, like 8-4. And it's like, ugh. But let's say you have a super deep SEC, and it's like, you've got, 4 or 5 teams sitting there at 9-3. And it's like, obviously they can make up for that by putting another SEC team in one of the at-large spots. But it's like, did that did that fourth Big Ten team really deserve to be in there then, because they're having to make up for it. So I think maybe if they took that model and they made some flexibility for it, like let's say you could have a at max of 4.
Right.
But then it be flexible, because let's say the ACC is deep, and let's say they have like 3 teams
Miami,
that come out
Carolina, Clemson,
right,
Florida State, all 4 of them are like, right up there, top of the division.
Yeah. Let's say something like that happens, then okay, now the ACC is going to have 4.
Yeah.
And let's say it kind of reduces the Big Ten maybe down to 2 or 3 or whatever the case may be. I think if they had fluidity like that, you would probably have people more open to it then, because it's like, okay, Big Ten kind of had a down year. They'll still be in, they'll still have teams represent, but they don't need to have as many teams represent type of thing. But I don't know if they would go for that, because realistically for these commissioners, it's all about the branding. It's all about getting your branded teams out there as far as quality, getting the names out there and whatnot. But I mean, I think it would be great if they did it that way.
I 100% agree. I think there needs to be that flexibility and couple that with the structure to take things out of the committee's hands, because that's been the real talking point for a long time. Does the committee know what they're doing? Are they doing a great job every time? And I think the more you can just kind of streamline that process, that's what you need to do.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But Aaman, buddy, we are coming up to the end of the show, so I appreciate you coming on, good sir. It's been a blast as always. Always love talking ball with you, man. It's always a blast.
No, it's been great, man. I've missed this a lot, so I really appreciate you having me on, and hopefully we don't have to wait too long to do it again.
Oh yeah, I say you're welcome anytime. Appreciate everybody tuning in. I will not be back next week. I have a combination of I have to go get my teeth fixed and I have a concert. So I don't know if I'll do the concert after getting my teeth fixed, because apparently I'm supposed to be like all numbed up and whatnot. But who knows? Maybe I'll be able to have a couple drinks and feel really, really good because of that numbing and whatnot. But we'll find out though. But I should be back the week after that, which would be if I could get my right calendar up, the 12th, I should be back. Nonetheless, though, appreciate you coming out, Aaman. Appreciate everybody tuning in. If you liked everything that you heard and saw, there's a little QR code underneath Aaman right there that you can scan. It tells you a little bit more about Military Broadcast Radio. You can learn a little bit more about some of the veterans, the other veteran hosts. You can learn more about what their mission is and everything like that. Their biggest mission is to help veterans get podcast equipment, help them learn how to use their voice, tell their stories, help it get out there to the world and whatnot. And if you would like to potentially donate, there is an option to donate there as well. Again, all the proceeds go 100% back to the veterans as far as getting them equipment, teaching them the StreamYard, everything like the Pretty Studio and everything like that Aaman and I use. But appreciate everybody tuning in, and we will see y'all back in a couple weeks.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Military Broadcast Radio. As we wrap up today's show, we want to remind you that the podcast of today's episode will be available right after we go off the air. So if you missed any part of the show or want to listen again, be sure to check it out. And remember, we're here to support and honor our veterans. Your stories and experiences matter, and we are committed to giving you a platform to share them. That's right. We're here to give our veterans a voice. So don't forget to catch the podcast and stay connected with us. Giving our veterans a voice.